Hi everybody, Dr. Kauser here. I'm going to talk about something which I'm also posting up on our Moodle page as a Word document, so if you want to, you can open up that and read that as well. Some people prefer to read something, some people prefer to have it in video, so I'm putting it in video here. What I'd like to talk about is ways that we think about history, ways that we think about the causes for events, sort of approaches that we take to the study of history. And here, the most common kind of approach that you will often see in the culture at large, something I've already seen in a lot of your discussions on our forums, and a lot of your posts, is what we call a personal approach to history. Here what we're talking about is something which discusses events in terms of individuals involved, most often political leaders, rulers, presidents, people like that, and which talks about what those individuals did, what's going on in their personalities, perhaps their background, their emotions, their decision-making processes that led them to do the particular things that they did. So a personal kind of approach to history might talk about their intelligence or lack thereof, might talk about their morality or lack thereof, or what sort of a warm or cold person they are, what sort of a bold or hesitant sort of a person they are, how ambitious or how humble they are. And we look at people like Hitler or JFK or Mahatma Gandhi or Martin Luther, somebody like that, and we discuss what they did in terms of their individual personalities. Okay, very, very popular approach to taking history, something I think you guys are familiar with and that I'm seeing a great deal of on your posts. And there's reasons why this approach is popular. One reason is that it brings the individuals to life, makes history seem a little more vivid and real to us when we think about individual people making these kinds of choices or having these kinds of experiences. And it makes it more relatable to us so that we feel like we can understand what's going on better. At the end of the day, of course, individuals do matter. History is the study of human beings, it's the study of people, and people come as individuals. And it is important to understand what individuals are doing. At the same time, there are also some limitations on the personal approach. And so what I want to encourage you to do here is to start moving beyond a simply personal approach to looking at what happens in history, and instead start taking what I'm going to call a more institutional approach, and I'll discuss what that means in a minute. Drawbacks of the personal approach. There are two main kinds of drawbacks we're concerned about here. One is that the personal approach can be too exclusive. It tends to focus on individuals, and when it does that, it most often focuses on leading individuals, prominent individuals, powerful individuals, presidents, premiers, prime ministers, kings, rulers, popes, these kinds of individuals. And here, if you think about it, in a country like the United States, you have 300 million people living here. The President of the United States is only one person out of 300 million. Now, of course, he's a very powerful individual. He's a very significant public individual. Nevertheless, he is still just one individual. What the President is feeling, what the President is thinking may or may not be what everybody else in the country is thinking, right? And when you take that one individual in a position of power and put them in the foreground of your explanation of an event, you may start excluding the experiences, the opinions, the choices that are being made by the hundreds of millions of other people that you're not paying attention to. Okay, so when you take too individualistic of an approach, too personal of an approach, you may end up producing a very sort of aristocratic kind of history where only the powerful people matter and the general group of the population ends up not really counting for very much in your explanation. So you want to watch for that kind of exclusivity. The other thing which may be an issue with this personal kind of approach to history is it may be misleading as to the actual causes. It can distort what's actually going on or why people are making the decisions they're doing or why events go in the course that they do. It tends to make us rely an awfully lot on the quirks of individuals rather than larger forces that may be out there shaping events. Okay? If you take an event, say, like the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1963, where you've got President Kennedy of the United States on the one hand, Premier Khrushchev of the Soviet Union on the other hand, each of them very, very bold, colorful kind of personalities, having this showdown, the world teetering on the brink of nuclear war, depending on what the two of them decide to do. Let's just indulge in a little bit of a thought experiment here. Supposing that the two of them were to switch places. Supposing that we're in an alternative universe, and instead of President Kennedy being born in the United States, he was born in the Soviet Union, and still had the same personality and so forth, but came up through the ranks of the Communist Party and wound up being the Soviet premier. Imagine that Nikita Khrushchev was born in the United States and wound up being president of the United States. Would each of them as an individual, based on their individual personalities, have made the exact same decisions in the Cuban Missile Crisis that they actually did, and leading the country that actually did rule? Of course not, right? If you put Kennedy in Russia, he would have made a very different set of decisions as the Russian leader than he did as the American leader, and vice versa. And the reason why is that the decisions they make, of course, are not shaped only by their individual personalities, they're shaped by structural factors. Structural factors. There's a particular political environment within those two countries. There's an ideological environment in the Cold War in the way that each of them bases their power and legitimizes their power on communism or on democracy. There's different economic settings, again, the communist system versus capitalism. Each of them would have different resources at their disposal, which are presented to them by the institutions, the economies, the governments, the military structures, and so forth, the various powers that they're leading. So the choices they make are not based simply on their individual personality. They're based on this whole array of other structural factors, which tells them what kinds of choices, what kinds of courses of action are possible, what sorts of courses of action are not possible, which are desirable, which are not desirable. And their own personality plays a role in all of this, but is very, very much constrained within this larger kind of a context, okay? Bottom line, you don't understand the event if you focus only on the personalities. Okay, they're important. I don't want to say no personalities, no individuals matter ever. They do, but there's a lot of other things going on, and we don't really understand the events until we understand the larger context, until we understand what we're going to call the institutions, okay, the institutional structures. So, what do we mean by institutions? In the social sciences, we use a more precise definition of this word institution than we use in everyday speech, although actually it encompasses a wider variety of things. In the social sciences, an institution means a structure of norms that govern the behavior of individuals within a society. Okay, structure of norms that governs the behavior of individuals within the society. Okay, let's unpack that a little bit. When we talk about a structure, what do we mean? We call it a structure for two reasons. First of all, as in a physical structure like a building, the norms we're talking about are relatively fixed. You don't get to make them up as you go along. Okay, there's a sort of fixed rules. They may change, they evolve over time. That's kind of what history is all about, is watching the structures evolve and change. People take them apart or put together new ones. But basically the norms are supposed to remain in place over time and apply in a similar way to lots of different people within the society. Also, the norms are complex. It's not just one rule governing a behavior, but it's usually a number of different rules which all work in combination. Okay, there's systems of these norms coming together. So it's a structure because structures are complicated. They're put together out of multiple parts that all have to work together for the whole thing to work, and because they're fairly fixed. They tend to be relatively long-lasting and encompass a large variety of people in a similar way. When we say norms, norms is another word for rules, might be something you might use as an alternative word there. It means that norms are what tell you how you're normally supposed to behave under certain circumstances. Okay, there's norms in your behavior, certain ways that you're expected to respond, that you're expected to behave. Okay, norms that govern your behavior. Sometimes people will defy norms or rebel against norms, but nevertheless, all societies have norms of behavior that are there. Okay, so an institution, okay, let's go back over that. It's a particular structure of norms governing individuals' behavior within the society. Okay, that's what we're looking at, institutions. Now, there's different kinds of things that are institutions. The kind that you probably think of when you hear the word, the sort of more common on the street definition, would be what might more properly be called an organization. That is to say, a specific, concrete place and group of people who behave according to certain norms. So, for example, a college or university, that's an institution, right? It's got certain roles assigned to people. Some people are students, some people are professors, some people are administrators, some people are staff, and so forth, and each of those groups has a particular set of rules. The students are supposed to study and socialize, the professors are supposed to teach and do research, so on and so forth, right? And you can look and say, there's that institution there, this university, and here are the people who are in there, and they're, behaving themselves according to the various norms of the institution that they belong to. So concrete organizations can be one type of institution, whether it's a college or a bank or a government agency or a church or any other kind of a thing like that, right? These sort of specific organizations or concrete organizations. However, and this is important, the definition we're talking about structures of norms also applies to things that are not concrete organizations. Okay, you could have a structure of norms governing individuals' behavior without it belonging to any one concrete organization that you could point to. So, for example, capitalism is an economic institution. It's a set of rules that governs people's economic behavior, how they generate their wealth, what they do with their wealth, how they interact with one another in various ways as they attempt to acquire wealth and spend their wealth and invest it, and so on and so forth. Right? So capitalism is an institution. You can't point to a particular patch of land or a particular building or a particular group of people and say that's capitalism over there, right? Capitalism is much bigger than that. Although, of course, those things will participate in capitalism, right? But capitalism is something much more broad and abstract than any one particular concrete organization. In the same way, people say that marriage is an institution, right? Marriage is a system of norms, a structure of norms. Excuse me. A structure of norms which governs people's behavior when you're in a marriage or when you're dealing with somebody who is in a marriage. There are certain ways they're supposed to behave, certain ways they're not supposed to behave, right, as dictated to them by society's institution of marriage. Okay, so we have two different kinds of institutions. The concrete kind, like a bank or a church, and an abstract kind, like a belief system or an economic system or a set of morals or ideologies, something like marriage or democracy or something like that, also institutions. Okay? Now, let's bring this back around to personality. When you reflect on this idea of an institution, you'll see that it intersects with our idea of personal history. It overlaps it, ultimately it transcends it. The personalities of leaders and rulers are shaped by the institutions that they belong to, right? By their family, by their community, by their economy, by their ideologies and beliefs and morals, by their career in the institutions they partake in that way, right? So personality is not just this independent thing that floats around by itself. Personality is itself shaped by the institutions it belongs to, right? People are individuals still. Different individuals in the same institutions will take somewhat different personalities and so forth, but nevertheless the parameters are set for them by the institutions that they participate in. And then likewise, when the individual finds himself making a decision or going through an experience, those conditions are set for them by the institutions, right? The kinds of decisions they're expected to make, the demands that are placed on them, the goals that they're trying to achieve, the resources they have to try and achieve those goals with, what sort of decisions might be considered acceptable or unacceptable. These things are all given to them by the structures around them. Okay, they don't make all up for themselves as individuals, but rather the institutional structures create this whole framework within which the individual operates. Now, that doesn't erase personality altogether. Personalities do still matter. If you had one president who was a rather timid kind of a guy and another president who was a flamboyant, bold kind of a guy, presumably they would operate somewhat differently even though they're operating within the same set of institutions. So we're not erasing personality here. Nevertheless, the bottom line I want to bring across here is to stress that personality is just one factor in how things go and really is operating within a set of conditions that are provided to it by the institutions that it operates in. So, as we move forward, and as you continue in your study of history in this course and in any other courses that you take, try to make sure you're paying attention not only to individual personalities, but make sure you're also taking time to analyze the structures within which those personal individuals or those individual personalities are operating. Look for the structures. They may be concrete structures. How is the government organized? How is a company organized? That kind of a thing. They may be abstract structures. What is the moral institution of the society? What is the intellectual institution of the society within which the person operates? Analyze those so that you can come up with a deeper, richer, fuller understanding of the lives these individuals are actually leading. Okay, thanks very much. Bye-bye.